everybody. Brady here. Happy 2026. I've been gone for a couple months. Oh, Brady, also known as the War Hamster. I've been gone the last couple of months. Haven't been doing my regular shows with Colonel Towner or Douglas V. Gibbs, but those are about to start again next week, we hope. But today we are doing another edition of our Grassroots Spotlight. Joining me today for the third time, which ties him with Sheriff Mack for the most frequent guest now, is former J6 prisoner Brian Mock. How you doing, buddy?
Good. Well, thanks for having me back. I'm kind of honored. I'm tied for number one, and I'm your first one back. So it's been a crazy year.
Yeah, well, it's been 8 days. It's already been a crazy year. No, that's actually why it's the reason we're doing this today. It's kind of funny. We'll play a clip in a second, but Brian and I have stayed in touch via text and on Twitter. And, we've just been, what are you up to? And he tells me, I got a lot of stuff to talk about. Let's get back on the show. And we talked about doing that here in the next few weeks. But yesterday, I'm minding my own business and reading through the news. And what do I see but squad member Ayanna Presley reading Brian into the congressional record with a full-on plaque. So what I want to do, Brian is in Minnesota right now. I'm going to try to play that clip for us, and then have Brian just say, "What the heck have you been up to? How did you get How did you get on the floor of Congress?" So let me see if I can pull that up for you. We need to add volume. It's been a while. I'm getting rusty. Okay.
Yeah. He was an election denier.
You can hear that, okay, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So here we go. Go get him, Ayanna.
He was an election denier. So an election fraud lie. Now, he claims he did these things in the name of patriotism, but really he's just a criminal. So raise your hand if you oppose Trump's pardon of this Minnesota individual.
Ma'am, this grandstanding nonsense.
This is not grandstanding.
Exactly
this is
what
accountability.
Minnesotans hate about D.C.
This is accountability, and you are hypocrites.
Why don't you just calm down?
So again, I will take your refusal.
Mr. Chairman, order, decorum. She's off the rails.
Reclaiming my time. I'm not off the rails, please.
You are totally off the rails.
Nancy, enough with your tropes. Give me my time back.
Order, Mr. Chairman.
If Republicans were serious about reclaiming my time,
Just shut up!
You
have no time left. You're accuse me of things.
You're out of time. You're out of time. We're done here.
I think we've had enough of Ayanna, don't you?
Wow. That's the whole judge me by my enemies thing comes to mind on that one.
Oh yeah, that's a feather in your cap.
Wow.
I'm jealous. I think I've been an insurrectionist longer than you have, and I can't get a whole placard of my own in Congress. So you're doing something right, buddy.
Yeah, it's so ridiculous. The funny thing, too, is the picture that she put up there, that was from my original indictment. That's one of the things they used to say I was a violent insurrectionist and hold me pre-trial illegally. Now, the funny thing with that is when you run the frame fully, that was an officer I was trying to help pick up off the ground that they said that I had pushed to the ground and kicked. Now, I was actually going to pick him up, and if you watch the full film, where my hands are, I actually miss him. I was just looking at it the other day. I miss him completely, and I step back away from him, and then they take a still frame of my foot off the ground and said I kicked him. But at trial, they abandoned immediately the idea. Within weeks, the DOJ, after I was locked up, had abandoned the idea that I pushed him, and that's the image that they just used. So she clearly didn't even do her research for it. And as I was backing away, that's when they said I kicked him. Well, at trial, the officer said he couldn't say if he had been kicked. It was clear that I hadn't ever pushed him to the ground, so he couldn't say if an assault had actually occurred. And then my idiot lawyer, just before I fired him mid-trial, asked him. He showed a picture, and there's a guy that was closer to him and me, kind of like here. And he showed him a picture. Said, "Well, you can't say if you were kicked, but if you were kicked, which one of these guys could have done it?" Which is, I can't believe he actually asked that in court. But it ended up working out because the guy looks at the picture, looks at me in court. It's clearly me, right? And the other guy looks at the picture, looks at me, looks at the picture, and picked the other guy. So not only could he said, "I don't know if I was assaulted," but he picked the other guy out of a two-man lineup as being the one that could have done it if he was assaulted. the judge still found me guilty of this, Judge Boasberg.
Of course, my
Of
buddy.
course. Yeah, because he said, well, there's question, and I proved I would have had to have been about 12 to 15 feet tall if I had kicked him. And when he went through his reasoning for finding me guilty, he said, well, there's question if there was an assault, or if you even could have kicked him. But I feel that you intended to kick him.
Yeah, I don't doesn't really think seems like it stands up to the high bar of legal proof, in my opinion. But
Yeah.
yeah,
And
I'm
she
gonna
also actually mentioned the throwing of a flagpole, which was actually laughed out of court by Boasberg, because I was actually getting hit in the head with the flagpole, and I reached up and a little piece broke off, and I threw it to an open area. He literally laughed at my prosecutor on that one. So none of the facts she got was actually correct, and the picture she used was proven to not have actually been an assault. So good work by the squad. Spot on as usual.
Hey, people, I'm gonna put the links to the first two shows Brian did with me in the link here at the bottom of this video, and he goes into a lot of detail about his whole, I guess, journey through the legal system. So we're not going to spend a lot of time on that today. But I'm guessing, without even talking to you about this, that your idiot of a prosecutor is probably still being employed by the Trump DOJ, because I haven't seen anyone get fired.
Oh, well, actually, I got him fired.
Okay.
So 11 days after my meeting with Ed Martin. So we'll get into that one. That's a lot of fun. So
Well,
yeah.
let's do that then. Let's. What have you? Last time we talked, I don't know, it was like 6 months ago. You've been a busy little beaver, and you're going to tell us what you've been up to and why. Why did Ayanna Pressley feel compelled to single you out of the 1,500 insurrectionists on the floor yesterday? So let's turn it over to you.
Yeah. Well, the timing is quite auspicious. Let's go back to where we were. So back, for those that don't know, I got myself out of prison, resentenced to time served January 3rd. The reason being was around the First Step Act. So the First Step Act that Trump signed into law back in 2017, I believe. This allowed, it's kind of a groundbreaking law for prison reform. What it was doing was for federal prisoners who were low recidivism. This isn't, murderers and gangbangers. This is guys that are in there for drug charges, white collar crimes. It was an opportunity for people to actually earn time off of their sentence. So if you were programming, you weren't getting in trouble, you weren't doing drugs, you could earn up to 15 days off your sentence for every month that you were incarcerated. And I get into prison and find out that they're just not applying these time credits. And it's this huge scandal within the prison system. All the prison reform people know about it. People have been complaining to Congress about it. We've had the director at the time, or two directors have come in, and Congress has asked them about it, and they come up with a myriad of excuses as to why there's issues with implementing it. Oh, well, the software system, it's a lot of work to figure out all this stuff. So all this BS. Basically, long story short is they get paid a whole lot of money to have these guys in there. They get paid for the programming. They get paid for actually having them sit in there. So what I found is that just guys are getting screwed out of their lawfully earned time off of their sentence. And so nobody's able to get this to the courts. The DOJ is blocking anybody that tries to get it in front of a judge. Now, I went backdoor on them. So the 1512 obstruction charge gets reversed by the Supreme Court. And my superseding indictment, when I wouldn't plead out and play ball with them, they tacked a whole bunch of charges on. One of them was a 1512. So I file a motion immediately for resentencing. Now they slow roll it all the way up to when Trump gets elected, and then they're like, maybe we should put this on the docket. I get in there on January 3rd. Now I had paperwork that showed I should have been out November 4th of 2024. This is now January 3rd of 2025, exactly 60 days later. And so I start arguing my earned time credits. Well, I'm the first person who's ever successfully argued those first time credits. Now, my AUSA, Michael Gordon, comes in and says, Your Honor, you don't have jurisdiction here. This is an internal bureaucratic issue within the BOP. Mr. Mock isn't alone. There's thousands of other people who are in his exact same position arguing for his earned time credits. But our fear is that if you rule in his favor, this is going to open a Pandora's box. So what he's saying is, we know there's thousands of people being illegally held. Mr. Mock is one of them. But Your Honor, you need to conspire with us because they could get out, and we don't want them out. I mean, we know that pesky law thing says they are out, but you know, that was Congress that did that, and we're the DOJ, and you're a federal judge. So, like, you know, and so the judge, to his credit, Boasberg ruled in my favor. That's how I got out on January 3rd. And I spent 17 days homeless in a hotel room in Western Wisconsin because Minnesota wouldn't let me back in the state. That's a whole nother story we won't go into, but that's what brought me up to the pardon day. And as we had discussed before, I went down and I met my now girlfriend. She's the one woman in Minnesota who never shut down her business during COVID. So Walls set the AG after her, which it's very nice to see that the AG and Walls might be indicted here pretty soon. So that would be just some just desserts right there.
Yeah, Keith Ellison's a bit of work. He is going to be in there.
Yeah. What's funny is when they came down they sent Ellison all the way down here to a town of 450 to go after a single mom because she wouldn't force people to wear masks in her restaurant. And she served him when he came down there. Of course, they tossed the suit, but he comes down to harass her, and she hands him the lawsuit. That was great. So she's a cool chick. But we ended up traveling the country. Basically, my goal when I got out was to have a real Jan 6 investigation and to reveal this fraud that was going on within the BOP. And I promised guys when I left, they were under the impression that I was just going to stroll up to Pennsylvania Ave, knock on the door, and be like, "Hey, Don, can you get my boys out?" And like, well, I may know some people, but I don't know people like that. So really, with no contacts, we drove to DC. Stupidly, naively, just kind of started knocking on doors in Congress and telling people our story. And the next thing you know, I'm at CPAC meeting with Jim Comer, the head of oversight. I'm meeting with lawyers of oversight. I'm meeting with judiciary. I meet Jim Jordan. I meet Marjorie Taylor Greene. I'm talking to chiefs of staff. And we spend like 6 months in and around the DC area, in DC, and we're pushing. We started our own organization, which is now pretty much defunct, and I worked with another one. But we had rally at the Capitol on March 27th. I called for my AUSA to get fired and indicted, and told Pam Bondi to do it. Well, fast forward to June, and I think this is just after we talked last. I got this impromptu meeting with Ed Martin. Went in there for over an hour. We talked about my AUSA Michael Gordon. We talked about Judge Boasberg, because of course they were talking impeachment at that point. We talked about my trial. We talked about my being held illegally in the DC jail. We talked about BOP issues. And the day after I was there, the BOP put out the statement about the First Step Act. And the following weeks, I was getting requests from the DOJ for information from our organization because we had all these contacts inside the prison. Basically, being a whistleblower from what was happening in the prisons directly to the deputy director via the DOJ. So they had all these meetings, these closed door meetings with Joshua Smith, the deputy director of the BOP, all based on information that I was providing. And so as a result of this, two things happened. 11 days after my meeting with Ed Martin, my AUSA Michael Gordon's fired. And then within a month, a little less than that, they announced, the director of the BOP announced an FSA, First Step Act task force within the BOP. And so I thought, okay, fantastic. We're actually making some headway here. We're getting something to happen. Basically, it didn't. It was all surface level. It appeared that something was going to happen. And then I was tasked with creating a team of Jan 6ers. The DOJ requested that I pull in like 5 other people, and that we start collecting information for the DOJ to pursue judges, AUSAs, FBI agents, basically assisting the weaponization task force to go after the people who weaponize the government against us. And so again, we're sitting back going, okay, something's happening. I wrote legal briefs, basically outlining here's because this is unprecedented. You're going to go take out an entire a federal bench and charge, I don't know, 15, 20 federal judges with depriving American citizens of their conspiring to deprive American citizens of their due process and civil rights. This is groundbreaking. This is huge. It takes a big set to actually go after judges at this level. And so that was on the table, as well as them going after the DC jail. And they had named specific people, like the deputy warden, lieutenant who assaulted me, lieutenant who assaulted another guy. So they were going to go after some specific people. And so I'm collecting statements from J6ers, evidence. We're getting this together, and then there just hits this wall where everything just stops, and I'm not getting answers from people. There's some more info that I have as to why this happened and how, but basically we had contact with Pete Hegseth, because that's my life. Of course, we have contact with Pete Hegseth now, because every landscaper has contact with Pete. I end up getting in contact with him, and we're texting. And I said, look, he admitted that he hadn't kept up with Jan 6 stuff. The guy's a little busy. I'll cut him some slack. And it was right when someone had committed suicide. Matthew Wepler had committed suicide, and it was like 2 weeks after this. And I said, look, we have this thing together. We were tasked with putting this team together with the DOJ, and we're not seeing the results we need. And he says, what can I do to help? And I said, well, I need a meeting with Pam Bondi and somebody from the White House, like White House counsel or a Stephen Miller level attorney that can understand this. Because what I was finding as I was talking to people within the DOJ is they didn't understand fully. Even lawyers who had represented Jan6ers weren't understanding fully how the government was weaponized against us. It was bizarre to me. I'm sitting with Ed Martin and his chief of staff and other lawyers, and ones who had represented Jan6ers, and I was the most successful Jan 6 attorney representing myself, and they all said it and admitted to it. And so I'm sitting down there, and we're talking about things, and they're going, "That is he right on this?" I said, "Yeah, it's in my record. How do you not know this?" And so I'm bringing up evidence, and they're going, "Anybody? No, nobody's heard of this." And this is beyond scary to me, because I've been screaming this from the mountaintop for the last 4 years. How the hell do you not know that these documents exist? Things that I put in my motion were the very first piece of global discovery, and Ed Martin doesn't know this exists. Clearly, Pam Bondi doesn't, and so I'm going, okay, I need to have a meeting. I need to sit down with lawyers who can understand what I'm bringing forward and why these judges should be indicted, why these AUSAs and how they broke the law, how the FBI broke the law. This is serious. And
Yeah,
so
I want to jump in. I want to jump in there real quick to put this into context. Sure. They called this the biggest investigation in U.S. history. They unleashed throughout the country thousands and thousands of DOJ, FBI, and other employees to basically get, they broke search and seizure, every rule in the books they were breaking to get 1,500 people to set an example against the rest of us to never question our authority again. And it was a massive, massive undertaking. And there are records, and there is missing video. And, Brian's been at this almost full time for 5 years now. So, you got lawyers, they're sitting there, they're learning rules, regulations, case law, that sort of thing. that's kind of different than actually looking at what actually happened.
Oh, absolutely. So even just the basis of being held in prison, right? So pretrial detention um, should be rare, right? Like most people, if you're accused of a crime, you go in front of the judge. If it's local, you post bail. If it's federal, it's bond. You don't pay anything for it, and you go about your life. You get your lawyer and you defend yourself. Um, if someone has articulated a threat, right? You're in this situation where you've told, it's on the record, hey, you talk, I'm gonna stab you, right? Um, they have that on recording. They're going, wait a minute, this guy's a little unstable. There's reason to believe that he will actually go after a witness. That's one thing. Or they're a clear flight risk. That's the two reasons really that you have for holding someone. Well, what happened in these cases is Chief Judge Howe, an activist lefty judge, if you learn anything about Beryl Howe, she's hated by everyone in DC. She's a hardcore lefty. This woman is insane. And she created a new criteria known as the Cressman six factors that she made up just for Jan 6ers. It could never be used in any other cases, that flies in the face of all federal law, all precedents, all case law. This just doesn't exist. They've made it up for us. And so they created a new level of dangerousness just for Jan 6ers, which was they could attribute things like I didn't understand, and I didn't know this existed at my bond hearing. And nor did my lawyer know it existed. It wasn't argued by the prosecution to say, oh, there's this Cressman six factors, and let's go through them and show in our evidence that we're presenting for bond, saying that you should hold this person, why this meets that. Now, again, remember, I was released by the Minnesota magistrate, and this was appealed to DC and put in front of her. So what she was doing in her mind was literally making the argument for the prosecution and saying words that match this criteria that she had created that nobody else knew about in the courtroom, to say things like I was a leader. And I'm like, I'm looking around going, is she talking about me? Like I was outside the building. I'm like, the two assaults are two alleged pushes and they're still frames. Like I pushed a shield and I've never wavered for that. I pushed a shield because the cop threatened to shoot me. That was my sole offense on January 6th. I never went in the building, never destroyed anything. I wasn't part of any organization. I was just a citizen. And so as I'm going through these things, I'm like, I wasn't there in tactical gear. I didn't have a weapon of any kind. It's just me. And so I'm going through this going, what the hell is this lady talking about? And so she used that to deny me bond. So I'm being illegally held. And meanwhile, they don't have any discovery for me. They didn't have discovery for me until like 8 months later. So my right to a speedy trial by design was just thrown out the window. So this is the start of the whole thing, was predicated on deprivation of our civil rights. Basic due process violations
Yeah,
were the very basis of it.
Yeah, let's point out you were not the only one that this is happening to. You were not singled out. This type of misallocation of legal resources is being applied to over 1,000 people.
Correct.
This is not a one-off situation.
Yeah, and some were worse than others. Now, they kind of abandoned this. Now, the whole reason they did this is they wanted to apply pressure to get us to plead out. The whole goal was as many pleas as possible, because there's a number of factors they have in this. One, yes, they wanted people scared to ever stand up and question the government again. You are correct there. But two was to build a case against Trump, and three was to destroy MAGA, and anybody they viewed as a political enemy, right? So to do that, they had to show that Trump was responsible for January 6th. That's the big lie, right? So to do that, they charged him with the 1512 obstruction charge, which again was complete BS. We all knew it from the start. That was thrown out by the Supreme Court. That was an Enron case about destroying documents. Okay, so if you it made no sense at the time. We all knew it made no sense. But what they wanted was enough of us to plead out, because in all the plea deals, it blamed Trump. Trump was at fault. Every plea deal was written where it was blaming Trump. So if and when, in their mind, it ever got to trial, you had all these people that were already found guilty of the 1512. Trump was accused of the 1512 because that's the only felony they could bring against him. And all these people had said, well, yeah, they all pled out and they all said it was Trump. That's his own people all admit it. Then you've got the case against Trump. And
Yeah,
that's what was
in front of a DC jury, that's just a slam dunk.
right.
He becomes a criminal, a felon, and is ineligible to run for president again. That's the plot right there.
Yep, 100%. And as we were in prison illegally in jail in DC, that's what was presented to us. Just plead out and this gets better. We'll send you out of here. You'll go to a better facility. You'll get less time. We were coerced. We're getting tortured by our government. And as you, from the other conversations that we've had, I spent 5 to 7 months out of that year that I was pre-trial being held in DC illegally. 5 to 7 months was in solitary, like intense solitary. The most time I ever saw out of the cell on any given day was 6 hours. So they were abusive. I was assaulted. I was threatened. I was tortured by my government, and that was all in an effort to get me to roll over on Donald Trump and say he was guilty. So that's the basis for this. That's what I'm talking about.
Now, real quick, I don't want to go deep into this, but just to clarify this, and you don't have to answer if you don't want to, and there's reasons you may not to, but
sure.
I've been highly critical of a certain defense attorney, J6 defense attorney by the name of Shipley, because he was advising. I know you know who he is, Shipwreck Crew on X. He's a great.
He was my attorney for about 6 to 8 months in there.
So he's one of many attorneys that are advising the J6 prisoners, take this deal because you can never win. That's the best advice. So I'm going to get your deal. I'm going to get your sentence reduced, and that's my defense attorney.
Yep.
I found that rather disturbing from day one, and you've got more experience with it. If you want to touch on that, feel free. I know there's reasons you may not want to, so that's up to you. But
there's a lot of things I'd like to say about Shipley. At this point, I'll let that one lie. Let's just say your instincts are pretty over target on this one.
Fair enough. And again, I actually follow Shipley's account on X because he actually does he actually puts out some content of a non-lawyer wouldn't know. And I'm also criticized the living hell out of him when he's dumb enough to jump into the political arena. So I'm an equal opportunity critic on that one. Back to your story. I don't want to get anybody in legal.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, I'll stay away from that one right now. So here's where I was when I'm meeting with Ed Martin and various people with the DOJ. This is what we're discussing, is how they weaponize this. Now, I won't dive into all the minutia of legal crap. I'm not a lawyer, but I play one from time to time. And so for whatever reason, I may have missed my calling. The law makes sense to me. When I read through this, it clicks. I can read through pages. I figured this out in prison. I could read through stuff, and guys were like, this might as well be in Latin. I don't know what the hell they're talking about. I would scan through it and be like, what are you talking about? This, and this. They'll argue this. And that's what you got from that? How did you not get that from that? And so I realized pretty early on that I had kind of a natural knack for this. And so when people start talking about it, I see the arguments pretty much instantly, and I see the holes in other people's arguments. So this all made sense. So I'm sitting down. It was kind of a surreal point where I'm sitting in the DOJ and I'm talking to these lawyers, and I'm more than holding my own in there. The more lawyers I meet, the less impressed I am with them, quite frankly. So this is what we're trying to put together. So we've got a number of J6ers working on this, trying to progress this issue and to get some level of justice. Now, we're not under the delusion that they're going to, there's going to be mass arrests and they're going to walk everybody through here that did this, that, or the other. But I've got someone at the DOJ, multiple people at the DOJ that are saying, yes, create a team. Let's go ahead. We like this idea. again, I'm sitting back going, finally, some justice. And so we had people like Mark McCloskey and some other lawyers who were out there trying to work for restitution with J6ers.
And McCloskey's the guy from Missouri with yeah.
Yep, that one. So I was on Steve Bannon with him at CPAC, actually. It's right after I met him. He represented me for a while. I actually really like Mark. Tickton has been with him. For some reasons of some things that happened there, I parted ways with them. I had hired another lawyer who was representing a couple of J6ers. He looked at my case and saw that there was a definite value add to having my case in and amongst those ones. We parted ways when, again, I've got lawyers that don't exactly see eye to eye. I don't sit around. I don't want to drag people along when I see a certain route. And so I took my own route. Reason being is when I talked to Pete Hegseth, he said, basically this is something that Pam has to handle, Pam Bondi. And so he agreed to send an email of mine directly to Pam. So I would assume that if Pete Hegseth sends you an email, it probably gets read. I would guess. So this gets sent. I requested this meeting with her and lawyers, and crickets on that one. Okay. Fast forward a few weeks, maybe a month, actually probably a couple months after this, I part ways with my second lawyer on this, and I start proceeding with the legal remedies that I have. At no point have all of my complaints gone to one central location. So, I filed an OIG complaint with the DOJ concerning my AUSA Michael Gordon, those kinds of issues. I filed my tort claim with my ask for a sizable amount of money in restitution, and that will happen as that happens. You have to go through a 6-month period where you make this claim to them, and then after that you can proceed with suing the government. So clock is ticking on that one. 2 days after I filed those two things electronically, I fly into DC. This is December 3rd, I believe. I flew into DC. I go into the courts and file a complaint against my judge, Judge Boasberg, who we've got senators and congressmen talking about impeachment. So I file my complaint there. I still haven't heard a word.
Real quick for the audience, it was part of my series. We're going into Skull and Bones and secret societies. Judge Boasberg was a Skull and Bones alumni. We did a full 1-hour video on him. It's available on my channel. I left out a few things about, and Boasberg's done a lot since. But if you see me, my little evil grin comes out when he mentions Boasberg. He's high on my little pinup wall list of targets I'd like to see taken down. So continue.
Yeah. I thought you'd like that. So yeah. Boasberg, I put my judicial complaint in. Then I went over to the House and I went down to the judiciary. So I go to House Judiciary and I filed a judicial impeachment statement against Boasberg. Now, none of these are completely detailed. None of them contain all the evidence that I have. Some of it's public, obviously, if you put stuff on the record. Some of it are things that I have. Now, one of the most there's a lot of damning things, but one of the most ironic things in my case is the motion that I wrote to dismiss my case back in 2021. There's several big parts to it, one of which was proving that the government was withholding exculpatory evidence. A couple dozen police reports of alleged misconduct put out by the DOJ, their OPR. They hid it. They just hid 25 reports of alleged misconduct. The other ones painted a totally different picture. The words out of the police officers' mouths was completely contrary to what happened that day. And I was able to, with what I had seen, basically write exactly what happened on January 6th that other people have pieced together with the video. I didn't need any of the videos. I had never seen any Jan 6 videos. I did this all from my personal view of what happened that day and the OPR police reports. I was able to put together the entire true narrative of January 6th without a single video. And everything you go through completely holds water when you take video evidence and put it up to this. So I completely shred their narrative. And in the last 3 pages, this is all handwritten from jail, by the way, on borrowed paper and pens because they won't give it to me. I highlight all of their due process, well, not all of, but much of their due process violations, including no access to pens, papers, the ability to file motions. I'd have a sit-in to let them even force them to file this motion. I wasn't getting, they were depriving us of water, food. We were getting retaliated against. No access to the courts, which means we had no access to a law library. I didn't have access to even a legal tablet at that point. It's me against the federal government on borrowed pen and paper. So I write this 43-page motion, and those last 3 pages highlight this. Now, Judge Boasberg rules on my case and says, with all these violations noted, he rules against me simply stating that I didn't make a legal argument, meaning that I didn't go through and state and cite, this is a Fifth Amendment violation based on case blah blah blah, right? Didn't cite the case law. The whole point of this is I can't file this in this way because I don't have access to it. And there's supposed to be a liberal interpretation by the judges when you're a pro se defendant because you don't know the law. They're supposed to apply when you make an argument that may not be cited properly. They're supposed to go, this is a layman. I understand what he's going, and use your expertise to fill it in. And within my statement, I actually quoted Bounds versus Smith. I don't know if it's verbatim, but damn near, to the best of my recollection, because I'd once seen it. That states that they're supposed to have access to the courts, and it's a big deal for a pro se defendant to have access to legal material. The fact that it was denied, even if he denied my motion, it was incumbent upon him to ensure that my civil rights weren't being violated, and that they turned over that exculpatory evidence. That was never done.
That's a compelling argument, and I'm familiar with that. When a jailhouse lawyer like yourself, the real jailhouse lawyer, when you represent yourself, the judge does have an obligation to fill in some of those legal blanks. They've got to be an equal footing, or something that approaches that.
Absolutely. And the interesting thing is, now fast forward to 2025, why Boasberg kind of got on the hot seat was he turns around this flight of illegals, and his reason, and on a Saturday morning, comes in and makes this ruling to turn them around. And in his reasoning for it is because these illegals are entitled to due process. Now, if I'm a senator or congressman, I'm screaming about this guy should be impeached for this reason or that reason, and he's gone on the record and said these illegals are entitled to due process. Don't you think the guy who was in prison that had it in writing, all my due process violations that he ignored, should be sitting on the House floor testifying in front of the world that judge who you're trying to impeach did that to a citizen who wasn't found guilty of anything? I was being held pre-trial illegally. That should fit their narrative. That should be something that House Republicans and Senate Republicans are interested in. One would think. So I go to DC to find out.
Yeah, one would think if they actually believe that the politicians are anything more than hot air, and they believe impeachment's even remotely politically possible, which it is not. For those that don't know the history of impeaching of judges, they've actually pulled it off like 2 or 3 times in the first decade of the United States after the Constitution. But then they realized that to get 3/4 or 2/3, whatever, the Senate to actually vote to convict was never going to happen. And we've had tyrannical judiciary ever since, because they are really tyrants in robes that answer to nobody.
Yep, 100%. There is no fear, and that's
politicians are just paying lip service.
Yep, and they know it. It's a talking point. So the last thing they want is someone to bring actual evidence that would have to compel them to do anything, because then they lose their talking point, right? So I bring this to the House. I file this thing. I walk it upstairs to the one office that I held like a 1-2% hope might do something, and that was Thomas Massey's office. So I brought it up there. I said, well, if anybody on the judiciary might do something, this might be the one. So I bring it up there, and long story short, my feeling 100% is they knew I was coming. I'm not conspiracy theory guy, but I've had death threats, a lot of them, in the lead up to this. It ratcheted up from your typical garden variety Antifa, nerd in their mama's basement, death threats to real articulable ones against me and my family. And so they didn't want this coming out, which will eventually get you to why I was on the floor of the house. So it ratcheted up big time in the lead up to this because they knew it was coming. When I went into Massey's office, I 100% believed that they knew I was coming, and they stonewalled me. And I went every way that I could to get in front of Massey. I wanted 10, 15 minutes with them because I wanted to show them things that were not within that briefing that I had. But I brought all 4 documents. I provided that to their office. I also told them something interesting. In the Steve Baker interview that Massey did, I don't know if you've seen this, but when they did the pipe bomber story, Massey sat down with this interview with Steve, and he was talking about a lot of stuff with his investigations as part of the judiciary over the years, talking to various people within the FBI and other law enforcement through this. So they did study video, and he seemed to be somebody, Massey in his office seemed to be a spot where J6ers could go over the years to at least seem to get someone that would listen and would actually do some level of investigation. And so he in that interview said something very interesting, is that he was threatened by the FBI. Marshall Yates, an FBI agent, I believe working with Bongino on his team, threatened an investigation into Massey's office if they continued with the investigation they were doing into the FBI and Capitol Police. Massey claims he called, I don't have any reason to doubt him, calls over to Bongino and says, Dan, what the hell? And lays into Dan. This guy's threatening to open an investigation against our office, and Dan's apologetic. He says, I'll take care of it. My belief is he did this interview with Steve Baker to make that public. It very much seemed like that was the deal. He just kind of there was no real segue. He just jumped into it in the interview. Well, here was the interesting thing that I had overlooked in my evidence for all of this last year. I had forwarded a copy of my transcripts to the DOJ because they wanted to see some of these things about Boasberg and my AUSA. And I look at the email chain because it had been bounced around from a few people. People had interest in my trial because it was the first trial that ever was stated that Roseanne Boylan was murdered by Officer Lila Morris. Now, I wasn't allowed to show the video of it, of course, by Boasberg, and Boasberg called it fantasy, but nonetheless, we got it on the record. And so some people had wanted that. Now, I go through the email chain and I realized Marshall Yates, ushouse.gov. Wait a minute. Marshall Yates got my transcripts when he was working for Thomas Massey in 2024. That's odd. Why did Marshall Yates have my court transcripts? I would assume that there was something done with that, that went up to the congressman. I had questions and I said, hey, the guy who's threatening you at the FBI used to work with you for you. And what was he doing with my transcripts a month before I was sentenced? Now, you clearly saw the irregularities in my case. If you read through the transcripts, people are appalled by what happened there. My due process rights were grossly violated. I never should have been found guilty. Um, now, I had questions. Now this guy works with the FBI. He's seen this. He's seen all this other evidence. Why is the FBI not having conversations with me and other J6ers? So I bring that to their attention, and there you go.
Yeah, here's Marshall Yates. March 2025, he's named Assistant Director of the Office of Congressional Affairs. Kash Patel names Yates. He recently served as counsel for Congressman Thomas Massey.
Mhm.
And this guy's threatening Massey? Or allegedly?
That's what Massey said on the Baker interview.
Yeah, this really, he used to work for Mo Brooks of Alabama, too.
Uh-huh.
Blah, blah, blah. Let's see. Auburn University. Oh, he's also a member of Hillsdale College's James Madison Fellowship, which is interesting. Yeah, this really highlights, it's a big point that's, one of the big talking points right now. Dan Bongino has just stepped down from his role as assistant. Yeah. Bongino didn't accomplish anything. Well, we don't know that yet. And I'm on the record of being pretty pro Bongino and giving the guy, he's earned more benefit of the doubt than most. So we'll see. But these guys walked into a viper's den. They had 20 years of Mueller, Comey, and Wray hiring people. We know they changed the FBI and the DOJ changed their hiring standards to do all this woke and DEI stuff. They got all these ideologues, and these are the people that you are relying to carry out your orders. And they definitely have a political agenda. We know there's a reason DC, votes 95% Democrat. The bias is inherent. So please continue. But that's an important point you're making.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. So I get stonewalled, and I bring this up to Wesley Hunt's office. He's also on the judiciary. And I figure, well, I got to at least hit 2 of these. I've already talked to Jim Jordan. I know that's going nowhere. I know he's compromised, and that's a lost cause. I've met with everyone. I mean, I've been through DC, so I actually liked one of the assistants that he had in there. So I was like, well, I'll just pop in impromptu and
this is who
quickly. This is Wesley Hunt's office. He's out of Houston.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep. He's an officer, Air Force officer. I like him. I mean, he's a politician, but at this point, all things I've seen seems to be decent until proven otherwise. I thought there's potential I can get somewhere, but at least it's a judiciary. At least I'm going to multiple places. I'm letting him know I got stonewalled over here by Massey's office. There's some question about this email. I want someone to investigate this. I want this to go somewhere within the judiciary. We should have a conversation. To date, nothing at this point. So he's actually running for Senate now. I don't know if he's up into the lead yet. He was running third behind Cornyn and Paxton. But he's gained a lot of traction here as of late. So he could very well be a senator soon from Texas. But I brought him all these BOP issues. Now, what's very interesting is the same day that I showed up in DC, same day. Now, it could be coincidence, maybe not. But mind you, this is 2 days after my OIG complaint. The director and deputy director of the BOP go on their podcast, and they state that they have been trying to fix the FSA. They've been trying to get guys out. They initially thought that it was just bureaucratic issues that they had going on, but that it was more than that. It was a rampant fraud and corruption within the BOP as to why these guys weren't getting out. They don't know where the damn money went. It's just a black hole. And that's one of the things I found out when I went through Congress. Appropriations couldn't tell me what the BOP budget looks like. Oversight couldn't tell me what the BOP budget looked like. We're talking billions of dollars, like 4-point-some billion dollars every year. All they know is it's split into 2 categories. 99% of it goes to this one category, and 1% of it goes to this other category. That's the BOP breakdown that exists, and they approve every year. And it's just a black hole.
we got to hammer that home, especially because the Minnesota, everyone's all focused on the Somali corruption. And I got a pretty viral tweet went out there when this first broke. I go, people, do not concentrate on Somalians. Do not focus on Minnesota. This is a government corruption problem, not just a Minnesota problem. It is throughout the government. And this is why our Congress critters, year after year, vote on, what they call it, continuing resolutions instead of actually passing a budget. And what that does is every single program is automatically renewed without any oversight whatsoever. It's exactly what you're describing right now. Exactly why they worked so hard to get Doge out of DC as fast as they possibly could. So we're pulling on the string up in Minnesota, but what Brian's talking about is a much bigger issue. Where's the money?
And that's why I was being threatened. Here's what I basically had done inadvertently was in my efforts to get the FPOA passed or funded. There's the Federal Prison Oversight Act was passed last year, like damn near unanimously. And that was to bring more oversight through the OIG. Through the organization that I had been working for, we had created this oversight already. We were already in the prisons doing real-time oversight. We had the data. That's why when I provided it to the DOJ, they were able to create this task force within weeks of what we had. And we said, well, you can do civilian oversight. We'll do it. You could fund us for a fraction of what the government's talking about doing. We're willing to do it. Or show you how to set it up to make it happen. Like, we'll work with you. We want this. They freaked out. We were attacked online. They had people who had supported us. They were calling them directly to because there were some quotes that they had put out of support, like you see on websites, so and so supports. It says something good about us. Look forward to working with you in the future, whatever. All of those people were contacted to contact back the organization and say, please remove my name from that. We're talking congressmen, other organizations, charitable people. I mean, systematically brought in to try to discredit the organization that I'm working for. Well, what I basically had figured out that I can't go into right now on the who and how. Basically, I found out that the BOP and specifically the FSA, as it was passed, is basically a giant money laundering organization and bill. So this money is going through the BOP and out the back door, but it's also working its way back around through a legit organization and back into the pockets of politicians. So they have no interest in stopping this, and who cares? It's prisoners. And so what if they have to sit in prison longer? We don't care. But not only that, the thing that we created that's supposed to get them out earlier, we created new funding for it, and we're pumping it through here. So the more programs they take, the more money goes through the facility. But here's what I found out when I'm in prison: there's no guards teaching it. There's no teachers teaching. There's a few programs they are, but by and large, it's the prisoners teaching the programs. And the way that you get your credits is you just pay off the guy, the other prisoner who's teaching the class, and they pass you. Okay? So there's no money going into it. It's coming from somewhere, it's going out somewhere, but it sure as hell isn't going into this program. So where does it go? And the same day I'm in here in Washington exposing that through these multiple things, the deputy director and the director are going on their own podcast and admitting that it's rampant fraud. So again, crickets. The OIG complaint gets kicked around various spots. I'm getting heavily monitored. I've got proof of this. My cell phone's tapped. All my electronic communication is tapped. I'm getting death threats overtly at this point. They're just not even trying to hide it. I'm in a small town. We joke about people sitting outside in vehicles because we know them. They park blocks away in this small town and come into my shop and start conversations. They just let me know they're there. And it's laughable at this point. So on the 29th of December, I put together I've been putting it together for a while, a comprehensive risk assessment that brought all of this story together for the first time. All of the oversight, I shouldn't even say all, but much of it, at least a good overview, to provide to White House counsel, the State Department, and the DOJ to say, look, I've got the tort claim out here. I've got these issues within the BOP. I had my issues with my AUSA. I had my issues with the judge. I had all these things in all these different spots. What we have is systemic failure across multiple administrations. What I'm requesting is is to do this quietly. Basically, I'm saying, look, I recognize the fact that you're not going to go out there publicly and have these hearings and actually go through and uncover fraud, and put people in handcuffs, and fix this system the way it should be. But work with me to come to a quiet resolution, start the process, course correct from the inside, recognize that these failures are there. I also recognize that, hey, I'm probably going to have to sign an NDA, and you're not going to accept any actual liability and accept anything for it. But at least I can follow through on the promise that I made to guys when I was in prison, that I would make every effort to get them to follow the law. And if all I can do is get them to finally be like, well, yeah, we need to find a new scam because we actually got to let these guys out of prison and follow the law that we wrote, then all of this that I've gone through can have some good. And so I wrote that risk assessment, 30 some odd pages. I sent it to Pete Hegseth, which he said he was going to send it to his lawyers. I asked that it was forwarded on to White House counsel. I sent it through a contact that I have, another contact in the White House, I believe she, with the State Department. She presumably, nobody wants to be sitting on a confidential risk assessment asked to go to White House counsel. They move it up the chain, right? I sent it to my contact at the DOJ and asked him to send that up to the proper person within that to escalate it. And what I asked for was very simple, very reasonable, is acknowledgement of the receipt of this, and to direct me to who the contact person was within 7 days. That's it. Who's the person that I should be corresponding with on this matter? Not to make a decision, not to say, hey, this is how we're going to proceed. Just who the hell gets this, right? In this vast network of the federal government. And then what I asked for was within 14 days of receipt was just an answer from said person or persons as to how you wanted to proceed. If this is something you want to sit down and have a conversation, then let's have the conversation, and I'll hire counsel if I need to hire counsel, and we'll proceed from there. Cricket. That was on the 29th of December. So I made a text back to my contact at the DOJ, and I said, are you seriously gonna make me go public over this rather than just sit down and have a conversation? It's like, well, fine. I guess this will actually be kind of fun. And so I put out a tweet, which I think you saw with the flash drive that I had left over from DC jail, and they had actually, I mysteriously had a whole bunch of evidence went missing from my storage locker when I was in prison. I didn't steal valuables. Nobody took that, but my discovery, my notes from court, my notes from when I was in the gulag, that stuff went missing, oddly. All my important paperwork and evidence kind of went missing, but they didn't get the flash drives. So I put out a tweet that I'm going to have a document drop. That was on the 6th. It was the night of the 6th. Yesterday, right after that, I get a call from Emerald Robinson's producer. She wants to have me on. So I went on yesterday on Emerald Robinson. That's out there. I'll shoot you a link if you care. It's way shorter than this, so it's not even really worth watching. You get a lot more out of this one. But I shouldn't say it isn't worth watching. I love Emerald. But at the end of the day, yeah, there we go. And if you look real close down there at the red one, right inside, you can see my number that I wrote on there. That's my DC identification number. And so I put that out there. Now, a few weeks back, there was a Reuters article that came out where Ed Martin denied remembering ever meeting with me. And it was a little bit of a hit piece on a couple of J6ers, myself included. They were trying to discredit me because they knew this was coming. And uh, it was basically reiterating the lies that my AUSA had said about me to basically make up and embellish a criminal past. And that seemed to be the highlight of what they put on there. Now, I described my meeting with Ed Martin. Ed Martin says he doesn't recall ever meeting with me. Now, I had been on Emerald Robinson like right after my meeting, or the FSA task force was named. I thanked Ed Martin. I thanked the BOP, the director, deputy director, and Donald Trump for creating this and trying to reform. And so this is on the record. My initial tweet about this, I sent to my DOJ contact for approval. He came back and said, no, can you change it? So then I sent the one that did go out. So I'm getting approval on my messaging from the DOJ back, because I have this all on record. And plus all my correspondence back and forth with them, everything we provided. And Ed is denying to Reuters that he even remembers this meeting. Okay, we're going to play that game, huh? So I go on this on Emerald Robinson yesterday, and then all of a sudden I get a phone call from another Jan 6er. I couldn't answer it. I was handling something else, and then my girlfriend comes running in. I'm sitting here a few feet away. I'm at her bar right now, which is closed, and my antique store is next door. I was working on some stuff. She comes in. She goes, "You got to look at this right now." I'm like, what? What are you talking about? This is happening right now. It's, slow down. What? And so she shows me Presley's video, and I'm like, wow. Okay. They're trying to discredit me on here right away. They're throwing me on the floor, and that pretty much brings us up to speed of where we're at. Other than my next steps are a number of legal filings that I'm going to be going through, as well as I have a reporter who I'm working with. Story is forthcoming that this is going to go into print. We're going to give this same type of overview, and we're going to start dropping documents and evidence systematically in a number of stories that goes into detail, highlights some of the legal things that we were trying to get accomplished through the DOJ. If they're not going to do it themselves, I'm going to put it out there to the American public, and it should piss them off. And I really want them to remember that this exists during midterms. Quite frankly, if the Republicans are not going to stand up for us, for the people who stood up for this country, I won't campaign for it. Actually, I'll actively campaign against them. If the DOJ is going to stand in my way, I'll volunteer my talents and efforts and knowledge to the people they're locking up now. Because quite frankly, I don't give a damn about Antifa in Portland. I don't care about the people that they're setting up the same way that they set up us, that they're trying to go out there and start a race war on the streets, which is really what's happening. So all those people they set up, they're going to have to bring these DOJ cases in areas that are not friendly to conservatives. So I feel like they would love having a Jan 6 defendant come walking in on behalf of the defense. I think I would make a fantastic witness for them. So if they're going to stand in our way like this, if they're not going to come in here and do what they're supposed to do, which is to reform this government, that's a mandate that Trump had coming in there, was reform. Back in 2016, he won because he was going to drain the swamp. He succeeded on a lot of things. He has absolutely failed at any effort to drain the swamp. Now, whether he just can't or whether he was never supposed to, I don't really care. There are people who are in there that if they don't have the ability to do it, if it's so god awful corrupt that they can't, come out and say it. I am. come out and say that you can't do it and name names. Tell us why you can't do it. Tell us why. How deep is the state? Who are the people? Do it.
Who are the gatekeepers? And it's not just one or two names. That's the problem. Is it's systemic.
Yep.
And the United States government is the largest company in the world, largest employer, and that's not even counting all the subcontractors. People like the subcontractor for the Bureau of Prisons. There is money
Right.
to be made, and these people make the money, and a lot of it gets reversed right back into campaign contributions. And this is not a Republican or Democrat problem. This is the state itself, and we are the enemy of the state. And by we, I'm talking about people on the right and the left, people that just want to, have a government that has to live by the rules that it proclaims itself, that it inflicts on the rest of us. And I'm there with you. If somebody is not going to be part of the solution, they are part of the problem.
Yep.
And, we don't have two political parties. We got 1.5. It is a uniparty. DC and all of its tendrils throughout the country. And, that's why I really like seeing what we're seeing out of Minnesota, but that is just pulling on one thread. Let's see what happens in California, where I spent most of my adult life. I can guarantee the corruption there is 20 times bigger than Minnesota ever dreamed of.
Right.
But there's trillions of dollars at stake. And we need about, 100 Brian Mocks out there calling attention to this stuff. Yeah. You've got your vector of attack. Your stuff. It's my channel. Your shit. I can cuss.
Yeah.
So keep doing it. And let me pull up your Twitter account real quick so people find that, because it does take a little bit of money.
Yeah.
To do what you're doing. So
I've gone massively in debt to do this.
GiveSendGo.com/help Brian Mock.
I appreciate any of that. It's we've gone many tens of thousands of dollars into debt to make this happen. This is advocacy doesn't pay well. And I'm terrible at actually going there and asking for donations and help and that kind of thing. So I appreciate you bringing that up. But to me, it was never about that. I didn't go to January 6th to make money. I didn't go there to lose millions either. This thing's cost me over $1 million accounting. But I went there because I cared about my country and I cared about what we left to my kids and my grandkids. And it was a bridge too far. And I, at that point, felt like, if I don't stand now, I don't have a right to bitch anymore. And seeing what I've seen, it wasn't a question of me going out and bringing awareness to this. My only stupidity or being naive really was that I thought this was an issue that Trump had signed into law, that it was just a matter that if their administration was made aware of it, that he would do something about it. And the White House is clearly aware of it. I've called. I sat at the Capitol in March and called him out to grant clemency to these guys. Now, one very interesting thing that nobody has talked about yet, that will be coming out, is there was talk of massive clemency, supposed like thousands of people getting clemency in the summer. I want to say it was going into June or July. This was supposed to happen. May 28th was his last pardon, and there was nothing coming out of the pardon office all the way up until Santos. Now, I kept things very quiet about this, but I had a high-level source, and someone that can confirm this with you, actually someone you know very well, had actually confirmed, had heard this independently. Someone had said something to him that shouldn't have said it, but more or less was that there was an investigation into the pardon department. And I believe there were some things that happened. When I hit this story fully, this is high level scandal stuff. I don't know how this hasn't broken yet, but this will be one of those scandal stories that when they dig into it fully, I believe that it's the reason that they went completely dark on me, that they were moving forward on something. Someone ended up with either some dirt on somebody within the administration, or someone appointed by the administration, and stuff was stopped. Things like pardons, things like investigations into judges, things like everything that I was working on was stopped. And I got too close is really what happened. And I was screwing with people's money in the billions. So when it all comes down,
I get the feeling you and I are going to be talking again pretty soon. You can tell the story here first if you want. It's always an open invitation. But when you got something juicy like that, I'll be very interested.
Oh, it's a good one. Yeah. It's good. The tentacles of this one actually go back to 20-year-old scandals in this country. It goes into spots that you'll holy crap. So two of the biggest scandals in U.S. history all converge into this one. And there's like multiple scandals in and amongst all of this. It's crazy. I stumbled into some crazy stuff. I sure can pick my protest, because this is like my first political protest I ever went to. And
that's not even remotely surprising what you're outlining there. What you're kind of describing is, we're still uncovering stuff happening to this very day that's roots all go back to Iran-Contra. And then we can trace that back to 1947 and the whole passage of the National Security Act, and how the CIA was able to finagle their way into getting covert operations empowered. All that's, and we can trace it all back. So quite often today's scandals are cover-ups for yesterday's scandals, and that's the story we've been telling. I think you and I talked about this. They needed to make an example of J6 because that was a cover-up for the stolen 2020 election. And they had to steal the 2020 election because Trump's team was getting very close to actually revealing everything that happened with Russiagate and all that sort of stuff. And Russiagate was a cover-up for Hillary scandals. It's just one after the other. Every single, the cover-up's worse than the crime. And, that's something they, date back to Nixon, who probably was a lot more innocent than most of the people sitting on the Hill right now.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Brian, that's a pretty good story you told today. Yeah, we're going to get back to this. I got a couple of takeaways for you.
Sure.
First of all, you got to come out and visit me here in New Hampshire. And the reason is some of my friends in the New Hampshire State Legislature are getting ready to push through a bill that allows you to sit for the bar in New Hampshire without getting a law degree.
All right.
Well, I'm actually thinking about doing that myself. So you come out here,
That's awesome.
You get reciprocity across the other countries. So
yeah,
you can stay at my place while you do it.
Cool. I appreciate that. I might take you up on that one. That'd kind of be fun.
Yeah, I'll let you know. I don't want to study all that case law, but I've had to learn my own. I've gone through so many stacks of case laws just dealing with a condo association that it's like I'm ready to put that on.
Yeah.
I like to leave the audience with a takeaway, something actionable, and there is something going on right now that ties into what Brian has been talking about, or where is activism going to go? Tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. Eastern, the Supreme Court is going to start releasing some of their decisions from the most recent session. The big one I'm keeping my eye on is the Calais case, CLAIS or CALLAIS. This is about race-based redistricting. Given the nature of the oral arguments, and I listened to them, and also the language in the decision of the recent Texas redistricting case, it is very likely that this Supreme Court is about to say you can no longer do race-based gerrymandering. If that happens, and a lot of the quote-unquote experts thought we were going to get these decisions before Christmas, which would give us enough time to redistrict before the primaries. And if we get this decision out here Friday or Monday on this one, there should be enough time, and it could create up to around 20 very safe red congressional seats immediately in time for 2026. That's more powerful than it sounds, because these are brand new districts. You do not have an incumbent rhino with a big war chest. And if we get this decision out here Friday or Monday on this one, there should be enough time, and it could create up to around 20 very safe red congressional seats immediately in time for 2026. That's more powerful than it sounds, because these are brand new districts. You do not have an incumbent rhino So if you're an activist and this is one of your districts, you get someone who's a true American grassroots activist who's not going to play the rhino game, is not part of the deep state. This is an opportunity to get 20 more people to join the Freedom Caucus or something similarly aligned. And it's right there. It's going to happen tomorrow. And this is going to be a short primary. Get some good butts in those seats. It's an opportunity that we will not have very often. And I'm so confident about the Supreme Court decisions. On the betting markets, about a month ago, it was an 81% chance for the Democrats to take the House back in 2026. Well, I put a pretty sizable bet down that the Republicans hold it, simply because of this Supreme Court case. So everybody keep your eye on those announcements over the next couple of days from the Supreme Court. And if it goes our way, get active, because it could be your district.
Yeah.
Brian, hey, thanks for coming on. Your story is awesome.
Yeah.
We will definitely have you back. And if you even just want to come up and do some political commentary, I'll have you on my channel anytime.
Right on. I'll always have an opinion.
Yeah, that's one of those things. You're a landscaper 6 years ago, and now you got an opinion about a lot of things.
Yeah, crazy. I tell people, man, 5 years ago, my life became fiction, and it just keeps getting weirder every day.
Yeah, it's still going. We'll write the history in about 40 years on you and see how that goes. But best of luck in all your endeavors. Keep me in the loop.
Thanks, Brady. I appreciate you having me back on.
Cheers, brother.